In this tutorial, we're going to cover how to do parallax background moving. In other words, different backgrounds move at different speeds across the screen, depending on how you walk or stand still. Here's an example I've already done to demo how that looks, and then I'll redo a new one. So I got everything else so far with the options. We got start game, sound, walk into here, and we've got the character here. So as you see, if I stand still, the clouds are set to its own background layer, which move left and right, or pretty much just right, and the trees don't move and the house don't move until I start moving forward. And then you can start to see the trees and the little trees start moving in the background at different speeds. You can see how they start to overlap because they have different motions on there. The only thing not moving is the mountains and the house. But since the background moves with it, any tile that I have on here moves with the character accordingly. But the background moves at a different speed to kind of give you the effect that he's walking forward past some things. So we can intermix all these different things to create this effect. To do this, let's start with a new room. So I'll make a room here, and I'll probably make the room a bit wider, let's say 1200 pixels, so I have a little bit of room to walk in. We'll jump over here to objects and actually backgrounds. For the backgrounds, I don't want a gray color. I'm going to turn off the grid. I'm going to put, let's say, a nice blue color. Maybe something like, let's go to define colors and try and find a good color. Maybe a little bit brighter and less saturation and brighter. Somewhere around there should work. So we have a nice sky blue color. And that's with draw background as a color. So I want to have a blue color. Now we're going to start grabbing our images. I already drew some images using the Create a Background tool. And so right here we have the clouds were drawn in their own transparent layer. And I just went into the Edit Background and basically just drew some clouds in here. And then over here we have the mountains. So again, transparent background. I have the mountains here and a bit of green grass here. I tried to match the edges as much as I can because they're going to tile and repeat back and forth. And then over here on the tile sheet, which is the tileable texture, so it has that grid on there, I drew a couple more, let's see, a different tree, which I didn't actually use too much, a fence right here, some grass, and a building to show you the tiles won't move when you drop the tiles in. So we'll press OK. So I'm going to start grabbing on background 0. Visible in room starts, and I want to see, let's say, clouds. So the clouds drop in. And you can probably notice this cloud right here, these two, are the exact same ones here. And the reason is the tiles are repeating. It's by default, they usually just repeat. So if you uncheck them, the tile horizontal, it doesn't tile anymore. There's no more clouds repeating. So tile means keep repeating. If you turn off tile, then it won't repeat here. Vertical doesn't matter because we made it to cut off at the 480, the same height. This way, they'll keep scrolling through. We also want to make sure the tile or the clouds move with it. So we're going to set the horizontal speed to, let's say, 1. Something slow, and it's going to horizontally move 1, which is to the right direction. If we did left, it would move to the left, or -1 would move to the left. We don't need to go vertical speeds. So I don't need to do stretch because that'll stretch it between the left and the right. So we're just going to do tile, horizontal, and have a speed of 1 so it slides across the screen. So let's, I guess I'll demo that real quick. So drop room 9 in there. Oops. And press play. So what we're going to get now is, with sound in here, it usually takes a lot longer to load. We get this effect of the clouds sliding across the screen in a repetitive pattern. So as long as you don't have any seams where they don't match correctly, you're going to get a pretty good slide across the screen. Alright, so that's background 0. We can't put more than one background on the same background, so we're going to pick a new one. So I'm going to pick background 1 now. And so we're going to change this and put mountains. So the mountains now drop in. If you look closely, I didn't tile it perfectly together, so this tile horizontal doesn't perfectly match. So when you draw and try and use like the Photoshop and the offset or something, or try and guess as well as you can to make them match together so they're more seamless. If I wanted to make these slide across the screen, then I could, but usually clouds move on their own and mountains don't usually move on their own, so I'm not going to set a speed here. I can control with movements later, which I'll show for the trees. Alright, so we have the two here, so now I can turn both of these off or on. We can say whether it's visible when the room starts. I can turn it off, or make some kind of code to say that it turns on at a certain point. Over here in views, we're going to set this to, I guess this works, enable use of views and visible when room starts. So I'm only going to see this much, which gives me the ability to walk forward across the screen. And object following, we're going to put the main character in there and set it to, let's say, 250 by 250, so it kind of centers him on the screen as he walks. Now we'll go to objects, and I'll drop the character in last. So for the objects now, we can drop in whatever we want, or go to the tile sheet and start dropping in tiles. So right now it's set to the mountains because it looks at all your different backgrounds. So I'm going to pick the tile sheet, and I can start grabbing parts of the tiles. If I make this larger, I can see more. Alright, so I can decorate it with whatever I want. Let's say I drop a house in there. So I'm going to grab here, and if I hold the shift key, I can grab a large area. And with grid set to 32, it should drop in here right about there. So I can put a house in here. And if I wanted to put another house, I could drop another house in here also. So now I've got two houses. I'm also going to need a place for the character to walk on, so I should probably figure out where that's going to be. So I'm going to go to Objects and put Collision on here. And if I hold the Shift key, I can keep drawing at multiple. And so the character will walk on top of this black line. I'm going to put a couple more up here so he can't walk off the left of the screen, and a couple here so he can't walk off the right edge of the screen. Well, he can still jump over it though. Anyway, so that's the background. If we want to get rid of that now so we don't see it, we can go to Show right here, and we can say don't show me invisible objects. Since the collision is set to be invisible, I can uncheck that and now it disappears. It's still existing, it's just not showing it. You can do multiple different different things. We can turn off Show Objects, which you don't have any object on the screen yet. Show Tiles, I can turn off the tiles. I can show backgrounds and turn off the backgrounds. So you can filter out which ones you want to see and which ones you don't want to see. Alright, here, so now we have the houses in here, and let's drop the character in there so we can start walking around and seeing what's happening. So I'll drop him in somewhere on the left side of the screen so we can start walking over. And gravity will pull him down, or I can try and get him close enough to the ground. So we press play now. And what happens is the clouds by default start moving across the screen, and any tiles that I put on here and the background, since the background isn't set to move, they won't move either. So I walk over and everything moves with me, or moves accordingly as I walk past it. And the clouds by default just keep shuffling across the screen on their own, and I can walk left and right wherever I want. I could probably move the houses down one more layer. So let's go to the tiles for the house. Actually, I should be able to just right-click delete. Let's see if I can lower it a little bit more. That should work about right there. So it's a little bit closer to the ground because he's going to drop down about right there. And let's delete that one and try and drop that one right about there. All right, and let's put the door back in here. So this way, when he touches the door, he'll walk. He'll drop back into the other room if I want to. So now let's go with some trees. So I'm going to drop a tree in here, somewhere, let's say, right about here. And drop another tree in there. Maybe put one behind the house. But if you notice right now, it's sitting in front of the house. This has to do with the depth of the objects. So right now, the tree depth, if I click on the tree, is set to a depth of 10. The lower the number, the further towards you. So the higher the number, 10, 20, or all the way to 1,000,000, the further back into the screen it goes. So right now the tree has a depth of 10, but if I go to the tiles, this tile is drawn on the layer, or the depth of about, looks like 1,000,000. So because 1,000,000 is much larger than 10, it's much further into the screen. So I should draw this house something less than 10. So I can make a new layer right here, since I don't have any other ones. Let's make an add, and I'll make a layer 0, I guess. Well, I could do 9, because the tree is at 10, so I should do a depth of 9 for the house if I want it to be in front of there. But I can change those numbers as much as I want. So we have OK. And now I'm going to redraw this house. Actually, I can't delete this one until I switch back to this layer. And now I can, oops, click the layer. Now I can delete the house because it was drawn on that layer. Kind of like Photoshop, you draw on layers. So now I'm going to redraw this house on this layer, and it pops in front of the tree because the depth of this is less than the depth of the object. And you set the object's depth inside of the object itself. So that sets these in place. So we got the houses back, and we've got the trees in here. And I can also slide over here. I can put more tiles in here if I want to. I could put I can make a new depth level, something that's going to sit further in front, so I don't click on the houses by accident. I can start decorating if I wanted to. Put some. Actually, let's adjust the tile spacing to 8 by 8 and see what happens. Drop, oops. And by default it's set to delete underlying, so I'm going to uncheck that so I can start tiling some interesting effects on here. I can also switch out to the vines and start tiling these on top. So by default, when you tile, it's going to overwrite the same thing you had before, unless you change the depth. And then you can put it on its own layer if you wanted to. So we have those here. I could put some on this house if I wanted to. So that's that. And we also have the fence back here. So if I wanted to draw a fence area, I could select the fence and draw the fence at a depth of 9. So again, it's sitting on the same layer, so things can start getting mixed up if they're on the same layers. If I want them to be behind the house, I would go through and set a new layer. Say add, and call this, if I do 10, it'll match with the tree, so I don't want to do that. 9 should work, I guess. Or maybe I should have put the house on 8. But I can always change that later. So I start dropping in some fences. And yeah, I'll switch the tree layer, which is, yeah, let's change the 9. Let's change that to, let's go 8. So that becomes 8. So now we're going to make a new layer and have a depth of 9. And on the 9 layer, we're going to re-add the fences. So I'm going to go back to 8, delete off the fences, then go to 9. Oops, 9. And when I drop them now, they're going to sit behind the house because they're on their a higher number than the house was. So now I can drop fences behind the house, drop another one here if I want, and start decorating the level as much as I can. That should work there and there. Alright, so now I've got some fences in the background. The reason for using fences, let's say I delete some of these fences. We'll come back to dropping them in later. You'll see what happens with the trees. We also want to go and put some of the little trees in here. Before I do the little trees, let's take a look at what's happening now. On the tree we have, when we press left or right, it's going to start moving in direction. So if I press the right key, we're going to have the tree moving in the right direction. It's going to start moving and not stop at a speed of 1. And if I release the right, it's going to stop moving at a speed of 0. And if I press the left key, it's going to move in the left direction at a speed of 1. Since my character is walking at a speed of about 4, it's going to be slower moving in the same direction than the character, which will give the illusion that the character is walking faster. And again, if I release left, it stops the tree. And so the character, if I press right or left, actually he's jumping at a rate of 6, so the tree is going to be a lot slower than him. So that's what's happening with the tree. So if I press play, we're basically moving the tree and the person by corresponding to the left and right on the keyboard. So the tree is being controlled left and right, so it won't move automatically. So the clouds are moving automatically, but the trees aren't. If I press right, you see the trees start moving and he moves. They both move at different speeds. So you start to get the illusion that he's got the at different background speeds. However, trees probably aren't the best option to use for this because you start to see that they slide across the ground, and it's not the the best looking effect. So that's what the purpose of the fence is here. It kind of hides that tree sliding in the ground and gives it a better illusion if you hide it. Also, the other problem with coding it to the keyboard is that if you keep walking against the wall, you're not moving, but the trees are moving. And so they'll just keep sliding and sliding. So if you do the parallax effect, you want to make sure you don't have anything to stop the character. Otherwise, you might get some sliding distortion and start losing all your trees and backgrounds. Unless you code it to say, if the character isn't physically moving, then don't move the trees. So over here we have the same thing on tree number 2. It's just a smaller version, and because it's a smaller version, it's a smaller speed because it's further in the background. So half speed and a smaller tree gives the illusion that it's a slower moving tree. So we're going to switch out to objects again, and I'm going to grab tree 2, which is a much smaller version, and drop it further back back in the distance. So put another one back there. Let's put a couple back here, and these trees are drawn at a different depth. These are drawn at a depth of 20. And the higher the number, the further back in the distance it is. So they're sitting behind these objects. So I can keep populating lots of trees back there if I want. Make a forest of some kind. So now when he starts walking, we're going to get a lot of movement. And again, I should put the fence back there so it kind of conceals the type of movement back there. If you want to have birds flying across the screen, we could do both methods, such as the enemies when they fly across the screen, or you could do the clouds and just make an object that just keeps moving across the screen. So if I start moving, you start to see that the trees are moving at a different rate than I'm moving at. Let's close that out, and let's go back and add some tiles back here for the fence. Tile that back in there and back in there, and then add some little green grass. Because it's tileable, I can adjust the positions and not make it so regular. If this was attached to the fence, then it would always be the same intervals. But now, because it's not attached to the fence, I can drop it pretty much anywhere I want. And so they'll pop in here. I can drop it in the middle of the yard if I want to. And the character has the lowest depth, so he's going to be sitting in front of everything. But if you wanted to put a foreground image, some bushes or something, and he's going to walk behind, that would be under backgrounds, and you would set it as a foreground image. If I change this one, which is the mountains, to a foreground image, they'll pop in front of everything because it's foreground. If I uncheck that, it sits back in the background. So if you wanted to have something like a bush sitting here, or maybe it's a wagon that he's going to walk behind, or a barrel, then you would set those background images to being foregrounds, and they'd be glued to the screen basically. If you wanted to slide left and right, then you'd have to make them objects and slide them that way. So let's go back to the tiles, and if I wanted to, let's say, grab some more vines, and again I can switch these layers. If I do a million, it's going to sit way back behind everything, and I probably don't want it sitting behind everything. So let's undo that. And if I set 8, it's going to sit in front of everything, including the house. But I can leave it at 9. And so changing these layers, creating new layers, will give you different effects of where things are popping in at. Alright, so that should work pretty well. Some decorations. Decorated some plant life on some things. Alright, so now let's press play again and see what happens. And so again, the tiles don't move. When you drop tiles in, they stay static on the screen. The objects are the ones we're coded to a keyboard. So the trees are objects because we want them to move with us. But the tiles don't move. And this background is set to move at a constant speed, so again, we can't control that with motion. But as I move left and right, you can start to see that the character is walking through an environment. And wherever he goes, the trees kind of match with them. You could keep doing this with multiple layers of clouds if you wanted to. You can control left and right, but usually clouds kind of move on their own. If you want to have like a town in the background, a city in the background, different levels of the city, if you wanted to have water at different levels or a bridge back there, some kind of interesting stacked layer effect of things. Trees probably aren't the best because they're really close to me, but the further back, the better the effect would look. So cities and mountain background landscapes would work pretty well. And then over here you can see that it kind of leaves a little bit of a gap. so that's not, again, the best idea. We can probably adjust that by going back to objects and taking, let's go with a large tree, kind of drop one more part back there and see what happens. Or I could just move this over somewhere and kind of draw another one back there. So I have a little bit more room. It's probably going to ask, because this is now sitting out of the room when I save the room, do I really want this to be sitting outside the room? I'll drop another one over here. So I press check. Actually, it looks like it saved it anyway. It didn't ask me to. So go back to room 9, which is the one we're playing with. And you can see that we have our nice pretty room. We press play again. And you should walk nice and clearly through the level. So everything's moving correctly. You get that nice effect of parallax, that it's sliding at different speeds. If you wanted to with the objects, you can code them to say when they're out of the view, because they're going to be moving on their own, when they're out of the view, restart back here, and this way they'll always keep cycling through, and you'll never have to worry about that. The problem when the character reaches the edge of the screen. So if he keeps reaching here, they're going to keep moving, and eventually they're going to disappear off the screen if I keep walking forward. But if I code it like we did with the bird and say, if it leaves the X view, then restart at the X view plus W view over here, and it should pop in over here so it doesn't cycle out. Or just code it to say the character when he walks, if he's not physically moving, then don't move the trees. And that should more or less cover how the background effects work. If I walk through the door, I never coded the door, but that would work there. So hopefully that answers some questions. So again, a quick review. The objects are what code to the keyboard. The tiles don't change. You can pick tile sheets and drop tiles in there wherever you want them to go and mix and match stuff. The views are going to be what view is around the character and centers on him. The backgrounds, you can pick multiple layers of backgrounds and you can tile them and have the speeds of them moving across the screen. And the only thing to worry about in the objects is that you're going to start moving in a direction. You could use jump to position if you wanted to, but start moving in position. Or you could, you could even put them on the character himself if you wanted to, saying if when you press left, if the position is collision free, then jump to position and tell the tree to move with it also. So that's another option that you're checking for collision. Or you could even put the collision on the character himself. If when you press left, if object character left is collision free, then start moving the tree. Which we can try that real quick. Control. Check. When you press left, the tree is going to start moving in that direction. We need to tell the tree to stop if there's collision. So add event on step. So this will check every step of the way. So on step, we'll say if the check collision. So if object character left has collision at -6 relative to his position, then stop moving. So the character at -6 relative has collision. So move, then stop moving. We could put brackets on there if we want to, but it shouldn't matter. But generally it's a good habit to keep putting brackets on everything. But that should work. So if there's on step, if there's collision at position, then stop moving in that direction. We should also put the right direction in there also. So we'll go to control, check if character left has position collision and 6 pixels ahead of him relative to where he is. Then do the same thing, stop moving out of position. Alright, so now I press play. And so every step of the way is going to be checking if there's collision. So we don't need to worry about if there's collision to move it or not, just if there is to stop moving it. So everything works and he reaches here and it stops. It walks away and it stops. So if we code the same thing on the tree, we'll take all of these, copy, and jump to the tree itself, the tree 2, and add event, step, and paste this in here. So the same exact principles. If he has collision 6 pixels ahead of him, then stop moving the tree. If there's 6 pixels the other direction, stop moving. But otherwise, if he presses left, then start moving. So the step will overwrite the main keyboard command. If we press play again, it should stop both sets of trees now. So I walk over and it stops both sets of trees. I walk this way, I walk that way, and again it stops the trees, so it doesn't move the trees because he has collision. We should probably code him to say if he has collision, you're pressing left, then put idle on him, but that works well enough as is. And that pretty much does it for the game. He has the background moving with him, and we got the parallax effect, so we can move left and right, and it stops if you reach the edge of the wall. And that should work.